Good afternoon. We're going to finish the story that we started last Sunday, which was a holiday for helpers. If you remember, the children came to their classroom on a Sunday morning, and everything had been painted and bright and colorful, and each one recalled that each of them had someone in their family that worked on some of the items that they found around the room, repairing the toys, making a shelf for the toys, painting the chairs and walls and tables. So they wanted to have a party or a holiday for the people that helped them. So they were just so thankful for their helpers. So I'm going to continue with this story through to the end. So this little chapter is called Plans for the Holiday. May we have our party next week? Dickie asked. There will be too much to do to have it so soon, answered Miss Fulton. Let's have it next month. Making plans for a party is almost as much fun as the real thing. There's so much to do for a party that the children came to the church 4 afternoons. They really worked hard on those days. They made crepe paper hats and pasted flowers onto paper cups. They made pictures on paper plates with their crayons. They folded napkins. They even practiced a play to give as a surprise on the day of the party. One afternoon, Tommy didn't come to do his share of the work. "Where is Tommy?" asked Miss Fulton. "He was playing with his new bicycle and didn't want to stop," explained Ted. They were just putting the crayons away and washing out the paint jars when Tommy appeared. He was hot and dirty, and he looked cross. "You're too late," said Sally, frowning at him. "We did it all without you." "But I came all the other days," said Tommy. Somehow, as he looked at all the things for the party, the new bicycle didn't seem as much fun. "Of course you did," Miss Fulton smiled at Tommy. "And you can help Mr. Davis fix the chairs, Tommy, to make up for missing today." On the last work day, the children talked about the invitations. When the words sounded just right, Miss Fulton printed them carefully on paper that they had decorated with colored pictures. "Read it again, Miss Fulton," said Carol. "Read what it says on our invitations." Miss Fulton took the white paper with its gay pictures out of the envelope, unfolded it, and read, "We're going to have a holiday for helpers every one. We want you all to see our room. The smiling room is done. Next Saturday at 3:30, do come and have some fun." Ellen gave the invitation a little pat. "Oh, I hope they all can come," she said. And the verse at the bottom from the Bible is Deuteronomy 6:18. "Do that which is right and good." That's the part of the Bible I have been reading lately. Tommy's daddy. "Which invitation shall we take first?" said Miss Fulton. "Let's ask Tommy's father," said Carol, jumping up and down. "He's the captain at the firehouse. He has red hair just like the fire engine." The children laughed. Tommy laughed the loudest because his hair was fire engine red too. Well, when they were near the firehouse, Tommy and Carol ran ahead and handed the invitation to Captain Marsh. Then the children crowded around him as he opened it. "An invitation to a party? I'm surprised. I am surprised. Do the boys and girls at church always ask firemen to their parties?" "No, not always," explained Carol. "But we are having a special party for the daddies who helped make our room so nice." "Can you come?" asked Sally as she pulled at his sleeve. "If it's on my day off," Captain Marsh leaned against the engine and ladder and counted the days on his fingers. "Yes," he said at last. "It just happens that next Saturday is my holiday. Unless there's a fire in town. I'll be there. But there's one thing I'd like to know before then," he went on. "What made you call your new church school room the Smiling Room?" Before anyone could give him a hint, "Woo!" wailed the fire alarm. Firemen came running from every direction. The big doors were thrown open. The motors began to hum. Captain Marsh jumped onto the running board of the fire engine as it roared through the firehouse doorway, and raced down the street. The children could see him holding up his invitation and hear him shouting, "I'll see you Saturday, 3:30." As he waved his hat, his red hair shone in the sun just like Tommy's. It was just like the fire engine. "I never knew it could be so much fun to take invitations to people," said Ellen, beginning to skip and sing. And soon everyone else was skipping and singing too. Psalm 54, God is my helper. Dickie's daddy. "Hello there. That certainly is lively music. Even Ladyfingers feels like dancing to it." The children looked across the street, and there in his snow-white milk wagon was Mr. Miller, Dickie's daddy. "Please stop, Mr. Miller," shouted Anne. "We have a party invitation for you." "A party invitation? Well, well. Do you have one for Ladyfingers, too?" "I think Ladyfingers is his horse," asked Mr. Miller as he stopped close to the curb. "Oh, no," Anne laughed. "I wonder what people would think if they saw a horse going to church." "Well, tell me more about it," said Mr. Miller as the boys and girls crossed the street. He stepped down and pulled Dickie over closer to him. "Why do I get an invitation, son? Just because I belong to you?" "We're having a party in our new Sunday church schoolroom for the daddies that helped to make it, and we wanted you to come," gasped Carol all in one breath. "Whoa, wait a minute," Mr. Miller laughed. "You go faster than Ladyfingers." "Why do you call her that?" Ted had just moved into the neighborhood and didn't know Mr. Miller's friendly horse. This is a very old-fashioned book because horses help deliver the milk and the goodies. "Why do you call her that?" Ted asked as he had just moved into the neighborhood and didn't know Mr. Miller's friendly horse. "Because she loves Ladyfingers," answered Ellen. "We save our pennies to buy them for her. She even says thank you." How can a horse say thank you?" asked Ted. "I'll show you," said Dick. And then he just knew where to reach into the back of the wagon for a package of cakes. His daddy opened it and handed one to Ted. "Give it to her. She won't hurt you." Ladyfingers took the cake gently out of Ted's hand and ate it while they all watched. Then she raised one leg, crossed it over the other, and bowed as low as she could. And Ted knew exactly what Ladyfingers meant because he said, "You're welcome." "Why, is her leg tied up?" asked Ted. "A boy threw some milk bottles onto the street yesterday," answered Mr. Miller, sorry, "and a piece flew up and cut her." "Daddy says they're hard on tires, too," said Sally. "But what about this party? I'd like to see a room that smiles." And there, Mr. Miller stopped. The children looked at one another. They were so afraid he was going to say he might have to work next Saturday afternoon. But instead, he said with a chuckle, "I'll come if you let me bring chocolate milk for everyone." And that was quite all right with everyone. Romans 15:2. Let each of us please his neighbor. I think Ladyfingers is a beautiful horse. Carol's daddy. Remember, he's the one, I think, that helps the kids cross the street on Sunday mornings and probably on school days, too. Miss Fulton looked at her watch. "We'll have time to deliver one more invitation." "To Jim! Let's take it to Jim!" Tommy shouted. There on the corner was Jim with his jolly grin. Anne kept staring at him until he asked, "What are you looking at?" "Do I have soot on my face?" "No, you look different." Jim thought for a minute. "I know what it is. I couldn't find my glasses this morning. I'm always losing them, and Carol has to help me find them." "I thought policemen were good for finding things," said Roger. "Well, I can help strangers find the right street," answered Jim, "or little boys and girls find their mothers, their lost puppies, but I can't find my own glasses." As the children laughed, Miss Fulton felt someone tugging at her sleeve. "Don't forget, Miss Fulton," whispered Ellen. "Oh, yes," said Miss Fulton. "We've been busy talking, and we forgot to give you something. It's an invitation to a party." Anne handed Jim his invitation. "A party for all the people who made our room," she said. Jim held it away from his eyes. He held it up high. He held it down low. "I won't be able to read this until I find my glasses." "I certainly don't want to wait that long. Won't you tell me what it says?" The children knew it by heart, so they all said the words together. "We're going to have a holiday for helpers every one. We want you all to see our room, the smiling room, all done. Next Saturday at 3:30, do come and have some fun." "It's going to be in our new Sunday school church room," exclaimed Carol. "Can you come, Daddy?" "I sure will try," said Jim. "You'll have to see that I don't lose my glasses that day, Carol, or I'll walk right past the church and miss the best party I've ever been invited to." Proverbs 20:11, "Even a child is known by what he does." Sally's daddy. Miss Fulton and the children didn't have to ring the bell at the minister's house the next afternoon, for there was Mr. Parker in his overalls working in the garden. "Good afternoon," he said as he opened the gate for them. "Come right in. Are you looking for work? I have plenty of it for all of you to do if you'd like." "We've got work to do," said Tommy. "We're taking party invitations to people." "They're for all the people who helped to make our room," said Roger, "and here's yours." Mr. Parker wiped the dirt off his hands and read his invitation. "That party's going to be in the smiling room, Daddy." "Then I'll certainly be there," said Mr. Parker. "It's just about the nicest room in our church. It's a fine idea to invite other people to enjoy it." Just then Mrs. Parker came to the front door carrying a plate of cookies. "How did you know I always bake on Mondays?" she laughed. The children scrambled around as she held out the plate of cookies, still warm from the oven. "Sit down," said Mr. Parker, "and really enjoy them." The children sat down on the lawn as they munched their cookies. They watched Shep, the minister's dog, as he tried to catch a paper blowing around in the yard. Mr. Parker finished his cookie and began to cut some flowers. "If you don't mind if I keep working, do you?" he asked. "Will you have enough vases for all those flowers?" asked Ted, looking at the big basket of iris and poppies. "Oh, these aren't for our own house," explained Mr. Parker. "I'm going to the hospital this afternoon. Sick people always feel better when they see flowers in their room." "Children can't visit in hospitals," said Dick. "I couldn't even go see my new baby brother." That's an old-fashioned book. "That's because of the cold and measles and things," Ellen explained. "That's an old book, because now we have shots for measles and things. But actually, people do get sick, and right now, a lot of people can't go to the hospital when there's someone in there to visit. But there's ways we can visit using our phones, and we can still draw pictures and call on the telephone and video call. So if there's someone in the hospital, I'm sure praying for everybody in the hospital right now and the people who work in the hospital." Okay, back to our story. "Even if you can't visit, you can send gifts or cards to people in the hospital," said Mr. Parker. "Suppose you make some cards to go with my flowers. We'll go into business together." "Then the hospital rooms will be nice like ours," said Tommy. Miss Fulton was looking at her watch again. "I wish we could stay longer," said Anne, "but we're going to see my uncle at the post office." "Come back any time," said Mr. Parker. "Any time. But remember, Monday is the day for good, warm cookies." Matthew 25:36 says, "I was sick and you visited me." See the plate of cookies? They look like cutout cookies or peanut butter cookies. Anne's Uncle George. All the children had been to the post office many times to mail letters and packages, but this was the first time they'd ever gone to see what was back of all those mailboxes. There, putting letters into little holes as fast as he could, was Anne's Uncle George. All the children liked him because he was always ready to stop and talk to them, no matter how heavy his mailbag was. "Hello, Uncle George," called Anne. "We came to see you." "Well, hello, Anne. This is a surprise. Did you come to see whether I put the mail into the right places?" The children moved closer to watch as he put the letters into the cubby holes. When he wasn't looking, Anne put his invitation into the pile. I don't think you can do that nowadays in a post office. Old-fashioned book. "Aren't letters fun?" said Carol. "Most of them," answered Uncle George. "Sometimes we have to deliver letters that have bad news, too." "I know," said Tommy. "My mother cried when she read about Grandmother being sick. I wrote her a letter right away." "I'm sure that made her feel better," said Uncle George. "People like letters when they're sick or have birthdays. And flowers," said Anne, thinking of Mr. Parker's garden. "I sent my cousin a funny card when he had the mumps," said Ted. "It was a picture of a dog, and he had a bandage tied around his head." All this time, Uncle George was still busy putting letters in the right places. Suddenly he stopped and held one up. "Well, well, this one appears to be for me," he said. "Why don't you read it?" asked Tommy. So Uncle George flipped open the letter and read it out loud. "We're going to have a holiday for helpers everyone. We want you all to see our room, the Smiling Room, all done. Next Saturday at 3:30. Do come and have some fun. I've taken lots of invitations for a ride in my mailbag, but this is the first time I ever found one for myself," said Uncle George. "I'm surprised. The boys and girls want very much for you to come, Miss Fulton. The party is for some of the helpers who worked on our new room." There you can see the boxes that they're talking about and Uncle George. "The boys and girls are good workers too," answered Uncle George. "I haven't forgotten the winter mornings when those boys put ashes and salt on the slippery sidewalks. Sometimes they help me to find the new people in town, too." "Yes," said Ellen happily. "I told you where Ted lived when you had a letter for him." "Will you come to our party?" Carol asked. "It's going to be in the Smiling Room." "So now it has a name," said Uncle George. "But why is it the Smiling Room?" No one could give Uncle George even a hint. "Just wait and see," they said. "But will you come?" asked Carol again. "I surely will," answered Uncle George. "The minute I deliver my last letter on Saturday, I'll come straight to church. I won't even take time to put my mailbag away." Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be kind to one another." 3:30 is the name of this chapter. Let's get the picture on. That's the picture on the front of the book. Look at those old-fashioned cars. People going up and down Main Street on Saturday afternoon didn't know what was happening. Even before the time on the invitation, the children's guests began to arrive. On the street near the church, there was the milk wagon with Lady Fingers waiting patiently. Right behind her was Captain Marsh's bright red car, with the siren on the outside. Then there was Jim's motorcycle. It was leaning up against the tall elm tree near the corner. Next to it was the Jeep that Uncle George drove. He said it had the loudest horn in town. No wonder everyone said, "What in the world is going on in church today?" Dickie's daddy came first. He had his milk carrier with him, but this time it was filled with small bottles of chocolate milk. The children watched as he looked around the room. First he looked at the new curtains and then the shelves with all their toys, and then up to the newly painted ceiling and down to the bright rugs on the floor. On his face was a big smile. "I see why you call it the Smiling Room." Roger was pulling his coat. "Do you see, Mr. Miller?" "I sure do," said Mr. Miller. "I'm going to watch the others when they come in." Some of the children had to look twice at Uncle George before they knew him. They were used to seeing him in his gray uniform, but today he was dressed in a brown suit and a bright yellow tie. "Well," he said, shaking his head, "no one has to tell me why you call this the Smiling Room." He sat down near Anne to watch the smiles that grew and grew as Mr. Parker and Captain Marsh came in the door. Then, when Jim came in with his glasses on, he He took them off and wiped them carefully and put them back on and said, "It's a good thing that Carol found my glasses. I wouldn't miss this for anything. Here's a happy room if I ever saw one." "Miss Fulton says the church rooms are supposed to look happy as if they're glad to see you," said Carol. The kindergarten room truly looked like a party. Tommy and Ellen had cut streamers of colored crepe paper, and Mr. Davis, the sexton, has put them up on the side of the room, from one side of the room to the other. Red and white balloons hung from the lights. Right in the middle of the table was a vase of flowers from Mr. Parker's garden. There were saucers just waiting for the strawberry and vanilla ice cream that was coming from the drugstore. There were ice cream from the drugstore. That's old-fashioned. At the drugstore, I guess they could keep things cold. And in the grocery store, maybe they didn't keep things so cold. Maybe they got their meat, and that was in a cold place too, at a different store, because these were old-fashioned days. There were saucers just waiting for the strawberry and vanilla ice cream that was coming from the drugstore. There were plates of homemade cookies, too. Sally and Carol had helped their mothers to make them. Everyone had worked long and hard for this holiday, and now it was really, truly Saturday at 3:30. Psalm 66:1 says, "Make a joyful noise." My pictures. "Make a joyful noise unto God." How the holiday ended. Everything about the party was just as the children had planned it. The play was the best of all because it was about the daddies, and Captain Marsh laughed so hard he cried when he saw Roger dressed up like a fireman. The children had made him a wig from heavy red yarn. Tommy was Jim the policeman. He wore a pair of glasses so large that they kept falling off his nose. There they are laughing. Looks like the hobby horse's head fell off. I hope that doesn't happen to Ladyfingers for real. That's me again. Sally was the milkman and came in riding a wooden stick horse. On one end was the horse's head that her mother had helped her make from a brown stocking. Before she was halfway across the room, the horse's head fell off and went rolling across the floor. Ted was Uncle George and carried a big paper mail bag. It was filled with packages all wrapped in tissue paper and red ribbon. Ted gave one to each of the guests. It was a paper hat and a blue ribbon that said, "First prize, helper." Okay. Anne and Carol began to pass cookies and ice cream while Miss Fulton poured the milk. "My daddy said to tell you not to eat too many cookies," said Ellen. "He couldn't come because Charlie Gregg has the measles." It was a long time before anyone thought about going home, but at last Mr. Miller said, "I hate to leave, but Ladyfingers must get to bed. I want to bring your milk early in the morning so you won't be late for Sunday church." School. Okay, so also people didn't have refrigerators back then, so they needed things that were cold delivered every day. "I must get my beauty sleep so I can be at the corner bright and early to help you across the street," said Jim. It was a fine party, a real fine party. All of a sudden, Tommy started to laugh, and he pointed to Ladyfinger's head. Pinned to the harness below one ear was a blue ribbon that said, "First prize, helper," and over the other ear perched a crepe paper hat that one of the daddies had worn to the holiday for helpers. Psalm 122:1 says, "I was glad when they said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.'" Here is a little prayer. Dear God, we thank you for all the people who work to keep me safe and well. And then you can think of a person who works to keep you safe and well. I'll say, you think of who that person is. And then you name them and say, help that person in his work today and help me in my work too. Let's remember they helped everyone his neighbor. Do that which is right and good. Let each of us please his neighbor. The end. I don't have much of an activity. Yesterday, I just really enjoyed making the sock puppets. The sock puppets. Can't talk. And I ended up not reading a book yesterday because I was having fun sewing things. I sewed this picture of a pitcher onto some canvas, and I finished this barn that I started 30 years ago on a piece of canvas. And I'm thinking about, I don't know if you can see it, starting this picture of a doggy that looks like a doggy that we've had. Just something to do when I'm sitting still. I'm looking forward to reading to you tomorrow on Monday. And hopefully this was a nice book to listen to before you go to sleep. It's a long video. It was nice visiting with you. From Aunt Becky.